The UN UN Security Council, rather, has held a debate under the theme, quote unquote, peace and security in Africa. Members discussed how policy and financing are the main challenges to capacity building on the continent, and that any discussion on security issues must be informed by a thorough understanding of the socio-economic conditions and institutional capacity of countries. Members also called for stronger collaboration between the United Nations and the African Union. For more on this then, I'm joined now by our New York correspondent, that's William Denselow, with an update. William, thank you. So part of what happened was there was an update by the UN Secretary General's advisor on the African continent, but also then there was also one by the AU representative who was speaking there. What in essence was the tone of the debate and the conversation around how to secure peace and security on the African continent?
Well, this is a meeting that was called for by China, and it was very much a continuation of something that was very important to China the last time they held the rotating presidency at the UN Security Council last year. China took over the rotating presidency at the start of this month. So one of the first meetings that China's called for at the Security Council was on this very topic. Now, last year, a huge focus of that discussion was China's displeasure when it came to the COVID-19 vaccine inequality when it came to the global rollout, especially when it came to the inaccess that the African continent had to COVID-19 vaccines. The topic of this discussion this year has very much, as you rightly mentioned, been on the issues of peace and security and how there are a myriad of factors that all play a role. A number of things that were addressed at this Security Council meeting were things like how competition for resources, natural resources, can help fuel conflicts on across the continent. How things like factors that happen outside the continent have a huge impact across Africa as well. Things like the Ukraine war influencing higher food prices that, of course, contributes to instability across much of Africa, especially in places like the Horn of Africa, already dealing in parts with drought-like conditions and food insecurity that were further exacerbated by the conflict. The COVID-19 pandemic persists. There were warnings from the UN that could set back some of the UN's sustainable development goals, especially undermining some of the progress that's been made across much of the continent over recent years. So a myriad of factors, and really a big takeaway was the fact that member states said it was vital for there to be an international response, a regional response, which was something that, of course, the African Union very much expressed at this meeting, but as well as for more support to be given to local partners on the ground across the continent too.
So among the issues that stand out for me, William, and you can add to this, are these issues around the impact of climate change, for instance, on the stability on the African continent, but also the other theme, and we can talk about it in a moment, but let's maybe focus on the climate change factor. How does that come into this conversation about peace and security?
Well, there are huge threats. Of course, it's widely been spoken about at places like the United Nations that as climate change is expected widely among the scientific community to have a bigger role for extreme weather events to get even more extreme in the years ahead. It's especially low-income nations, low-income regions that will be hit the hardest. So places like parts of the Horn of Africa, they're already experiencing food insecurity, droughts. Those droughts are only expected to get worse in the years ahead. That's likely to put more strain on crucial resources, things like scarcity of water, things like that. So there's a real concern by the United Nations that these need to be addressed, and there are real fears that as climate change and extreme weather events are expected to get more ferocious in the years ahead, it is these nations that are already suffering the most that are expected to bear the brunt of this. This is a theme that is being played out, or the fears are that could be played out as far as the UN are concerned, not only across the African continent, but places like Bangladesh when it comes to extreme flooding as well. So this is a real global concern. So the real worry for African nations predominantly is that they haven't been the contributors predominantly to the impacts of climate change. So there are real calls for more to be done to give them the resources to help protect themselves. And of course, this is a crucial theme of the UN, that security and more resiliency needs to be built up in places where it's needed the most.
Yeah, and I do see that the issue of illicit financial flows from the African continent was also raised by Bankole Adeoye, who is the AU Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, but also issues around global terrorism in as much as it impacts the African continent. But before I let you go, William, I'd like you to talk to us about, there's always this talk around peacekeeping and peace building versus peace enforcement. That is an ongoing conversation that has been happening for many, many years. Which one do you emphasize more? I don't imagine that a conversation about peace and security on the African continent would have concluded without those themes coming up.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's a crucial topic of discussion, a very timely one as well, considering what we're seeing play out in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Of course, we've heard and we've seen in recent days that the DRC government has called for MONUSCO, the UN mission in the DRC that's been operating for over a decade in the country. They've called for their spokesperson to cease operating in the country. Of course, we've already seen several peacekeepers die in the east of the country, dozens of civilians lose their lives during these clashes. Of course, there's so much frustration, especially in the east of the DRC, about the ineffectiveness of that mission to keep civilians safe from rebel groups in that country. So there's a huge amount of concern. This was reiterated at the UN Security Council, especially by the likes of China, and Kenya's representative spoke very forcefully on the matter as well. They've called for more to be done to review these missions that have, in some cases, been there for a number of years, and to look into their effectiveness. So this is a hugely prominent piece of the conversation that will continue, especially as we head towards the UN General Assembly in just a few weeks' time. And it's important to note that Monday's meeting at the UN Security Council, so many people want to speak on these issues that meeting is continuing a little later today as well.
Wow. All right, I've got to thank you for that update. That's our correspondent in New York, William Denselow, updating us about that conversation and debate that has been happening about peace and security on the African continent, and it's been happening at the UN Security Council.